The recent summit between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Alaska was one of the most anticipated diplomatic encounters of this year. Expectations were high on both sides of the Atlantic. Supporters of Trump hoped he would secure a dramatic breakthrough and push for peace in Ukraine. Critics feared he would hand Putin a stage to legitimize his ongoing war. In the end, the outcome was complicated, symbolic, and filled with consequences that will echo far beyond Anchorage. The first striking element was the symbolism. For Putin, stepping onto American soil for the first time since the invasion of Ukraine began, was already a win. Images of him shaking hands with Trump under the cameras of global media sent a powerful signal back home. Russian state television immediately presented it as proof that the West cannot isolate Moscow forever. Just the visual of Putin standing as an equal to the President of the United States was a diplomatic victory. For Trump, the optics were also intentional. He wanted to appear as the only leader capable of negotiating directly with Moscow. He cast himself as a deal maker, a man of strength who could end wars by sitting down with adversaries. But symbolism without substance can be risky. After hours of discussion, the summit ended without a formal ceasefire, without a signed agreement, and without concrete results. The most surprising outcome was Trump's shift in strategy. Before the meeting, many expected him to push for an immediate ceasefire. Instead, he pivoted away from that demand and spoke about broader negotiations toward a peace agreement. This distinction is important. A ceasefire would freeze the battlefield where it stands today, likely cementing Russian territorial gains. Broader peace talks, however, mean something different. They align with Putin's long-standing preference to negotiate terms that could pressure Ukraine into ceding land in exchange for promises of peace. Reports indicate that Putin pressed for recognition of Russian control over Donetsk and Luhansk. These two eastern regions are the core of the conflict. Giving them up would be impossible for Kyiv to accept, both politically and morally. The very idea that Ukraine could be asked to sacrifice its territory sparked outrage in Kyiv. President Volodymyr Zelensky was not even invited to the Alaska summit. He will meet Trump in Washington separately, but the fact that he was excluded from the first stage created frustration and distrust. From the perspective of optics, Putin was the clear winner. He left Alaska with no new sanctions, no public concessions, and a spotlight that portrayed him as a respected global leader. Trump, by contrast, left empty-handed. He promised future negotiations but had little to show in the present. Critics in the United States accused him of giving away too much for too little, while his allies insisted that a long game was being played. For Ukraine, the outcome was painful. The demand that Kyiv abandon Donetsk and Luhansk was seen as outrageous. Ordinary Ukrainians expressed anger, saying they felt sidelined. The expectation that the summit might deliver at least a temporary pause in the bloodshed was crushed. Instead, they saw Putin smiling on American soil while the war continued. For families enduring bombings and displacement, this was another reminder that peace remains distant. European leaders reacted with caution but also with unease. For them, Ukraine's sovereignty cannot be negotiated away. To accept Russian demands would mean rewarding aggression, setting a precedent that borders in Europe can be redrawn by force. Countries like Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia were particularly vocal. Germany and France stressed that peace must come with justice, not with surrender. Yet behind the scenes, many European leaders know they depend heavily on American leadership. If Trump chooses to cut a deal that favors Moscow, Europe's ability to resist will be limited. One element that emerged from Trump's remarks was the idea of security guarantees for Ukraine. He hinted that Washington could offer some form of protection, short of full NATO membership. The details remain unclear. Would such guarantees be legally binding? Would they involve American troops on Ukrainian soil? Or would they be more symbolic promises, meant to reassure Kyiv but without real teeth? For Ukraine, genuine guarantees would be a lifeline. For Europe, they could reduce fears of escalation. For Russia, however, they would be unacceptable, seen as a direct threat to Moscow's security interests. The rest of the world also watched closely. China paid careful attention, knowing that any cracks in Western unity create opportunities for Beijing. If Trump moves closer to Moscow, it could reshape the triangular relationship between Washington, Moscow, and Beijing. Nations in the global south, from Brazil to India to South Africa, evaluated the summit through the lens of balance. Many of them see Trump as less committed to traditional alliances and more open to transactional deals. If he positions himself as a broker between Russia and Ukraine, these countries may see him as a pragmatic leader rather than a partisan figure. Inside Russia, the narrative was straightforward. Putin returned as a victor. He was portrayed as calm, rational, and treated with respect by the leader of the United States. Russian citizens saw their president standing tall, unbowed by Western pressure. This strengthens Putin's domestic position at a time when the war has dragged on and sanctions have bitten hard. Even without a ceasefire, the symbolism alone boosted his legitimacy at home. Inside the United States, reactions were polarized. Trump supporters praised him for trying to end the war, saying he was willing to think outside the box. They argued that endless fighting benefits no one, and that bold diplomacy is required. Critics, however, accused him of weakness, of giving Putin a free propaganda victory, and of undermining Ukraine's struggle for survival. Media outlets across the spectrum dissected every handshake, every phrase, every sign of compromise. The question now is what comes next. President Zelensky is expected to meet Trump in Washington. That meeting will be crucial. Zelensky must convince Trump that Ukraine cannot accept the loss of its territory. At the same time, Trump will want to show progress to the American public. He will face pressure to extract concessions from both sides. The danger is that the desire for a quick diplomatic win could lead to an unfair settlement that leaves Ukraine vulnerable. For Europe, the stakes are existential. If Russia succeeds in carving up Ukraine, it would embolden other authoritarian powers. The idea that borders can be changed through invasion would return to the heart of European politics. For NATO, the credibility of its security guarantees would be at risk. For the European Union, the dream of stability would be shattered. For Ukraine, the stakes are survival. Every day of war means destroyed infrastructure, shattered families, and lives lost. The hope that the Alaska summit could bring relief has faded. Now attention shifts to Washington, where Zelensky will plead his case. He will remind Trump and the world that this war is not just about land. It is about principles, sovereignty, and the future of democracy in Eastern Europe. For Russia, the summit was already a success. Putin has shown that he cannot be isolated, that he can negotiate directly with the United States, and that he still matters on the world stage. Whether or not future talks bring peace, he has already strengthened his hand. The global community remains divided. Some believe Trump's pivot opens a door for real negotiations. Others warn it is a dangerous trap, one that rewards aggression and punishes the victim. History shows that peace built on surrender rarely lasts. The months ahead will reveal whether Alaska was the start of a genuine path to peace, or just another stage in a long and brutal war.